You should know. All right. All right, Ryan. So excited to have you tonight and have you here presenting on your medicine, which is regenerative farming. I just am curious, just so that anybody who's not here are able to attend today, is there anything that you would like us to know as far as do you want any feedback or what would be most supportive for you?
Sure. I'm always open to feedback. Um, this presentation I actually did a little over 2 years ago. So I was public speaking for 3 years through Toastmasters International, the
Yeah.
nonprofit. And I had some health issues about 9 years ago that inspired me to go down the uh, rabbit hole of nutrition and regenerative farming and becoming obsessed with all things to do with health and wellness. And so, I ended up creating this PowerPoint. And then this was really like the genesis of Regenerative Ryan, even before I started rapping about it. But yeah, so yeah, I'm always open to feedback. But disclaimer, I did begin with Thousand Hills lifetime grazed 100% grass-fed beef about 3 months ago, which I learned even more in the last few months. So I added a little bit in there. I do work for them. I'm a salesman for them. Um, so that'll be tied in a little bit. But the majority, like 90%, is straight from 2 years ago, but it's very relevant and a lot of people don't know the connections. I made some conscious hip hop music, pretty much integrate all this information into music for another avenue to get it out there. And I'm going to do this first presentation, eating USDA organic is not enough. And then we can do questions in the middle, save them for the end. And then I got another one called It's Not the Cow, It's the How, to give you the whole scope of regenerative farming and how applies to the consumer is what I focus on mainly with these presentations.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ryan.
All right, let's blast off. a, a nation that destroys its soil destroys itself. Franklin D. Roosevelt, that's back in the 1940s. Eating USDA organic is not enough. Back in 1960, 4% of the US population had a chronic disease. Today, it's about 54% of children that have a chronic disease. Oh, how did we get here? Well, we got to go back to World War II to see the true impact of what that had on farming. Millions of Jews were murdered in these gas chambers with a chemical called Zyklon B. After the war, we took those German chemists and we repurposed Zyklon B as an insecticide to be sprayed on our food. Since then, we've patented thousands of toxic chemicals until we created the super toxin in 1976, glyphosate, the main ingredient in Roundup. It is classified as an antibiotic by our government. We are waging a war on the microbiome. Glyphosate is a water-soluble toxin that is killing all the biology on the entire globe. We spray about 4.5 billion pounds each year worldwide. And there's studies that measure glyphosate now 85% in our air and 85% in our water. These graphs here show the effects that they've had on chronic disease. And in 1992, we started spraying glyphosate on our farm fields. And you can see in 1996, we greatly increased that amount. And you could see this correlation of Parkinson's disease and dementia. And there was a lot of other diseases that really increased right when we started spraying this antibiotic on all of our food. And this is not the only thing, but this does break down the tight junctions in our gut lining, opening us up to all the other toxins, and they can be even more effective because of glyphosate. But there is hope. Organic produce sales grew 14.2% in 2020. And this is a step in the right direction. But eating USDA organic is not enough. We have huge industrial organic farms now that have this certification that tells them 30 things not to do. Don't use this pesticide, don't use this antibiotic, don't do that. But not one word about building healthy soil. Healthy soil is the solution. You can jump on Netflix and watch Kiss the Ground to learn how it reverses climate change by using regenerative farming practices. But today I'm going to focus a little bit more on how regenerative farming and healthy soil is a root cause solution to chronic disease. So I want to give you the top 3 reasons that eating USDA organic is not enough. Number 1, organic is not enough because it does not mean no toxicity. First of all, we have pesticide drift with these organic farms right next to the conventional farms, and the glyphosate can blow right on over onto the organic farms. More importantly, we have organic pesticides such as rotenone that are allowed to be used on organic farms. Now, rotenone we stopped using in 2019 as it was banned for causing Parkinson's disease. Now, in the UK, they banned it in 2009. Usually, eating organic is going to be less toxic than conventional, and I still have to eat, organic. But eating USDA organic does not mean no toxicity. Number 2, eating USDA organic does not mean nutritious. So I volunteered for the Real Food Campaign a couple years ago. I'm part of the Bionutrient Food Association. I drove for 11 hours around Chicago collecting food samples and sent them in to their lab so they could test the nutrient density of all sorts of different produce. And this was one of the results. They were looking at carrots, all different types of carrots. And a regeneratively grown carrot had 200 times more polyphenols, which is an antioxidant that's health promoting, than conventional or these organic industrial farmed carrots. So this is very important. The organic industrial farm food is typically what you buy in a supermarket with a produce label that shows Mexico, California, or Florida, with some exceptions if you're buying from a co-op in one of those states or locations. If you go to Whole Foods, for instance, the majority of those produce items are going to be shipped in from huge organic industrial farms, and the nutrition's not much better than conventional. So you want to buy local. Regenerative or biodynamic is synonymous with regenerative. What's really cool is they're coming out with a bionutrient meter for a phone. So they have one that you can buy if you want to help their quest in bringing healthy food to the masses. I think it's around $300, and you can help measure some of the nutrient density in your area and send those results. But they are coming out with an iPhone app and an Android app for our phones, and we can use an LED laser technology to read the nutrient density in food. So that's really going to put the power back to the people and revolutionize our food system a lot faster when people can see these results, in their hand in really quick time. So that's super exciting. I know what you're thinking. What about the beef? You got beef, bro? Well, don't hate, regenerate. When you're looking at certified organic beef production, these cattle can be confined with some access to outdoors and still fed grain and be considered organic. Now, many producers do raise grass-fed cows and have the organic seal, but it's just not guaranteed with that USDA organic seal when it comes to beef. Furthermore, when we're looking at the grass-fed labeling, there's a huge loophole there where you're actually allowed to feed cattle DDG while in confinement and still label them as 100% grass-fed. So DDG, they take GMO corn, put it in an ethanol plant, and it gets processed, and then this dry, nasty processed junk gets sprayed out. And there's a loophole where they can feed that to the cows and still label them 100% grass-fed, the beef that they sell to consumers. So I got a couple of resources if you want to dig deeper into that. But if you want to ensure that the beef that you're buying is truly 100% grass-fed, you want to look for these certifications. So the American Grass-Fed Association and the Verified Land to Market, which actually goes a little step farther and make sure they're using regenerative practices and holistically raising their animals. And why is grass-fed so important? Because we've been shown over and over again, it's 2.4 or 2 to 4 times more healthy fats, these CLAs, compared to grain-fed beef. And also has a lot better omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. A lot of these grain-fed meats are causing inflammation in our body because of these high omega-6 to omega-3 ratios. It can be as bad as 33 to 1 in some recent studies that these cows are being fed the DDG. But most recent study that's we just got preliminary results here at 1,000 Hills Lifetime Grazed with our regenerative beef. It was 1.4 omega-6 to 1 omega-3 ratio, which is, and nobody's ever seen something that incredible before when it comes to grass-fed beef. And so it's getting close to salmon as far as the heart healthy benefits. It's just beautiful to see that. And in particular, the American Grass-Fed Association, that ensures that it's the cattle's lifetime grazed, eating grass their entire life and never treated with hormones or antibiotics, which the organic certification does include no hormones or antibiotics, but it does not guarantee that it's 100% grass-fed. And here is a easy to understand chart that we recently created at 1,000 Hills that I just wanted to show. It has the regenerative on the left side, organic on the right, and you can see no petrochemical fertilizer, no pesticides or neonicotinoids, no synthetic hormones, no antibiotics, no GMOs. That can be true for both regenerative and organic. However, regenerative goes beyond organic and builds topsoil, sequesters carbon, which is reversing climate change, improves water filtration, increases biodiversity, and creates a wildlife and pollinator habitat. Some of these organic industrial farms are actually importing pollinators these days from other countries, which just absolutely blows my mind, but just show you, how bad it's gotten. And so if you want to learn more, 1,000 Hills lifetimegrazed.com is the website. You can, there's a lot of great information on there about the beef side. But I want to get to the third, final, probably most important. Eating USDA organic does not mean healthy soil. And Ray Archuleta, he's been studying soil his entire life for the NRCS. And he said recently that we didn't really know how the soil worked. There's these huge industrial organic farms, they're still using a monoculture. So there's one crop on thousands of acres. Less biodiversity means less resilience to pests and weeds. And we spray more toxic pesticides, which means more toxic food, less nutrients in our food, and it's no good. Now, the symbiotic relationship that's going on in the ground, in the soil, is very important. So we are feeding, this liquid carbon sugar to the microorganisms, and in exchange, those microbes make nutrients available and give it back to the plant. And so when you talk about regenerative farming practices and sequestering carbon, it's not only to reverse climate change, but you're feeding all those microbes. And the more carbon, the more microbes means healthier soil and more nutritious food, because now that nutrient density, is becoming available. And it's a similar thing that happens in your gut. We have to have the right gut microbiome and microbes in order to absorb all the nutrients as we eat it. So ultimately, we're making a transition as consumers to not only be looking at USDA Organic certification, but a regenerative organic certified label. You've probably been seeing it pop up here and there. And then if you're looking at meat, the verified land to market regenerative certification label are the two top of the line certifications. But even better yet, I always encourage talking to your farmers and shaking their hands, giving them a hug, asking them if they need help, volunteering, and ask them. I've done this several times, and the regenerative farmers are very happy to tell me how much soil organic matter, aka carbon, is in your soil, and they'll have soil tests. Most farmers will test once a year, and you can see if your local farmer is actually using regenerative farming practices like they say. Now, how much soil organic matter are you looking for? So Alex Podolinsky created the humus law for proper plant functioning, about a minimum of 3 to 5% of soil organic matter. Conventional and these organic industrial farms are about 1% or less. An optimal amount is about 10% for a regenerative farm. So that's kind of what you're looking for, an estimate when you do look at those soil tests. So ultimately, the microbes rule this world, and regenerative farming practices can foster healthy soil microbiome, which leads to healthy plants and animals, which is healthy humans, and then a healthy planet. It doesn't matter what you eat, but how it was produced. So every bite you take, you got to ask yourself, am I degenerating my health and the health of the planet? Or am I regenerating my health and the health of the planet? That is it for this presentation. If you have any questions or comments, let me know, then we can transition after the intermission to the second presentation.
I have a quick question about the pesticide you said was used on organic farms, Rotarone, I think you called it.
Oh yeah, Rotenone. Yeah.
Rotenone. Did you say that was banned already? Or
yeah, it was banned in 2019 in the US. It was banned in the UK in 2009.
okay, so we're not using that one anymore.
No.
Okay.
But it makes you wonder what else we might be using.
What else is?
I haven't done the research, but if somebody else wants to.
Yeah. Cool. Well, good. I'm glad that's not happening anymore.
Yeah. And I have a song called Pesticides that I talk about this in particular, and working on a music video for the next month or so to help shine some light on some of this stuff.
Nice. Can't wait to hear that.
Yeah.
Ryan, in your next presentation, are you going to touch on how we actually create the soil that is really beneficial, or are we not going to touch on that in either of these? Just out of curiosity, I'm just curious.
I will go into that, yeah, a little bit. I'll focus on the fastest way to regenerate the soil, which is through animal integration.
Cool, thank you. I think
the second fastest is composting.
Yeah. Yeah, composting I'm familiar with, but I was just curious what you've learned. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. I could send you these decks. I got an abundance of sources and citations.
Yeah, I think that'd be huge, really cool to look into and dive into it.
And even links for places to find regenerative food. Is there any more questions, or we can move on to it's not the cow, it's the how? Okay. Let's do that. That's fun. It's been a while since I've done presentations. All right. You can be pro-planet and pro-meat at the same time. Diana Rogers, registered dietitian and producer of the best documentary you haven't seen yet, Sacred Cow. It's not the cow, it's the how. Over 20 major civilizations have failed due to the collapse of agriculture. How arrogant would we be to presume the root cause of our collapse won't be the exact same thing? Roger Savory. Did you know the majority of desertification is due to improper agricultural practices? A third of the farmable land has been lost in the last 40 years due to desertification. Most ranching and farming is destroying soil and its building process. Soil loss is not new. The Fertile Crescent used to be fertile, and so did California. The US loses 1.7 billion tons of topsoil annually. And it causes this runaway degeneration each year. There's just more degraded soil, means less water absorption and retention, means less plant life and more soil erosion and runoff and more degraded soil. It was, I think, 9 years ago now that the UN said we have 60 growing seasons left until we can't even grow any more food. I'm curious what the new estimate is. But scientists everywhere are talking about this as being the sixth mass extinction on planet Earth if we don't change our agricultural practices is the biggest source of the problem, and our change the way we eat can really rapidly transform that. And so 75% of land is now degraded. But the good news is we can regenerate through regenerative farming. So there's 6 principles of regenerative agriculture. You want the least amount of disturbance. You don't want too much tilling and plowing. You want to use no-till or minimal tillage. You want living roots constantly feeding those microbes, sequestering carbon and feeding all those good bugs. Soil armor, protecting the soil, increasing biodiversity, a wide range of plants and animals. And context is key, so it's going to be different in every climate and location that you go. But today we're going to focus on animal integration in particular. Are cow farts destroying the planet? No. As a matter of fact, cows might be your only chance at saving the planet. Let me tell you why. If you look at the research out of the Journal of Animal Science, they showed that pre-settlement America the methane emissions were about 84% of current emissions. So it wasn't a problem then, it's not a problem now. If you're looking at these controlled animal feedlots, this is where some of this data about cow farts comes from. I mean, they're bunched in together, very degenerative practice. And, at that point, there can be, some off-gassing that is done. But if you're holistically grazing your animals and rotating them, you're sequestering more carbon than any of the farts and burps are going to cause. And so this is a regenerative practice that protects against the farts and the burps. So again, it's not the cow, it's the how. What is carbon-rich soil? What does it look like? So on the left here, this is structured, healthy soil that it has, compact soil aggregates that keeps that soil together. And dirt, as you see on the right side, looks like dust. This is on most organic industrial farms that use monocultures and also conventional farms. And so all we need is 1% increase in soil carbon, and we can hold up to 18 to 25,000 more gallons of water on that acre of land. So now if there's a huge rainfall and there's a flood, it doesn't just wash away like it does on these conventional farms with all that dirt just getting washed away with the pesticides and everything else going into the river and our groundwater. But it has, the structure that's able to absorb the water like a sponge and save it for later. So when there's a drought a few months later, it actually has water stored up from the last rainfall, and those plants are resilient and they're able to stay healthy, and we're able to feed everybody. So this is all about the structure of the soil. The big difference between degenerative, conventional, and regenerative agriculture is whether or not you're treating soil as a living organism that constantly needs to be fed carbon via living plant roots. We also have the mom and pop shops you see out in the country as you're driving around, when they just leave their cattle out in the open to overgraze or undergraze. They're not holistically moving them around. And so we can also overgraze where we pull out the grasses, pull out the roots. And now you see, just a big wide puddle of mud, usually in the corners or wherever they're congregating. And that doesn't allow that, grass to sequester more carbon and feed the soil and build healthy soil. So again, you want planned rotational grazing or holistic grazing where you're moving the cattle around, and you have a fence and you maybe block off an area after a few days or so, depending on the context. And they're eating about a third, trampling about a third, and then leaving another third, and they're pooping and peeing, and that's fertilizer for the soil. But you really want to allow that grass to rest after a while, and it grows up, taller again, and the roots grow deeper, sequesters more carbon and feeds that soil. So this is a fascinating study down in Bluffton, Georgia, white oak pastures. They did a study looking at the farts and the burps that I talked about earlier. And they showed if you are using regenerative farming practices, the soil carbon is going to offset any CO2 that's being released from belches and gas. So what this study concluded was for every pound of beef, they're sequestering 3.5 pounds of CO2. So these cows, they sequester more carbon in their entire lifetime than they do the belches and the gas. So it's been proven scientifically in this study and many other studies that it's not a problem. I like this study as well from the life cycle analysis, looking at the Beyond Burger and the Impossible Burger that have been marketed as going to save the world, and we should switch to eating this processed stuff. And this I will give a little credit. Those processed burgers are better than conventional beef, as you can see here. Conventional beef in these controlled animal feedlots releasing a lot of emissions in pork and chicken conventionally raised. But if you're looking at a regeneratively raised farm, like white oak pastures, you're sequestering carbon and reversing climate change with the beef that you're eating. And so these Beyond Burgers, these Impossible Burgers, they're using conventional crops that are actually contributing to more climate change. And so that's what this study is really letting us know here. Now, I want to also talk about the nutrient density of regenerative meat. So Gabe Brown's a pioneer of regenerative farming for the last 30 years. And he did a study on the nutrient density. And he asked, is an egg just an egg or a steak just a steak? Well, let's take a look. This data here is looking at the omega-3 fatty acid profile of his Nourished by Nature brand, which is his regenerative brand, regional natural brand, and then also a conventional brand. And as you can see here, beef, pork, chicken, and eggs, all four of these categories, the regeneratively farmed animals, those meats and eggs and everything just blew the other ones out of the water when it comes to omega-3 fatty acid profile, which is really good, healthy omega-3 fats for our brain and everything else. And they also looked at the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. I don't have the exact number, but it's really close to 1.5 to 1, like the recent study that we had with Thousand Hills. So it's really just fascinating to see the ability to have like a heart healthy option when it comes to meat. And I love this at the very top. A new measure of farming success should be nutrition per acre instead of being so focused on the yield. You can go to nourishedbynature.us to learn more about that and browse their selections. And I want to double up on this, the truth of grass-fed labeling, since we're on meat. I talked about this in the last presentation, but the grass-fed label, 100% grass-fed label, there's a loophole where they could still feed them DDG while in confinement, these dry distiller grains. So just be aware of that and make sure you're looking for the American grass-fed certification and the verified land to market when you're looking for truly grass-fed beef. Now, a third of our land surface right now estimated is naturally grassland. So I want you to close your eyes for a minute, and I'll do it too, and just imagine all those soils, that land, that grassland is healthy. Again, it's full of carbon and moisture. The earthworms are coming back, swirling around. The bees are buzzing. The birds are chirping again. You got beautiful butterflies, all different colors, flying around. Grasshoppers jumping on your leg. Ah, the biodiversity. Headed, folks. We can do it. We can make America graze again. We need to stop demonizing the cow because they are truly sacred. Remember, it's not the cow, it's the how. Concludes this presentation. Thank you.
I love it, Ryan. This is really fun. I also love your presentation. I just like your enthusiasm as you're going through it. And this is really actually beautiful to understand in, I think, a lot of ways that we don't necessarily understand the animal livestock because we've been looking at it through the lens of like what is causing due to the fact that there's not a lot of carbon going back in the nature and because of the way that they've been doing farming. And I like I have two questions for you. I have one of like, you said rotational grazing. Would you be able to go a little deeper on like what exactly rotational grazing, like what holistically that kind of looks like?
Yeah. So it's going to be slightly different for each location and climate, but it takes a lot more labor. Like for instance, All Grass Farms is a regenerative farm I volunteered at in Dundee. They, had stakes and just had a wire and moved around these stakes like every few days. They would have the cows, eating from the grasslands for a few days of one area, till it gets down a little bit, and then migrate them over, move them over, and then move all of the stakes and the rope and block off that area so that can grow back up. And then you confine them to another paddock. Well, I don't want to use the word confine, but they're fresh, they're open, they got the sunshine and everything else. And then, that happens maybe for another few days. You let them eat, they're trampling, they're pooping and peeing, that's fertilizer. And then, you move the fence and move them to the next paddock. Now there was actually I lied. All Grass Farms has an electric fence, which is real easy, like a mechanical electric fence where they could just hit a button, which was real easy. But the other regenerative farm that I was volunteering at, the Jacobson family farms, that they were using like stakes and going out there and moving. And the neighbor made a comment. He's like, "Dang, Kyle's always out there moving the damn cows around." And so it definitely takes a lot more commitment and devotion in order to do that practice.
Thank you for that. And then my second question is, and you might not know, but I love that you talked about nutrition versus yield. Like if we could start to pay more attention to the nutrition side of it instead of the yield side of it. And I know that we tend to obviously overproduce sometimes. And I'm curious if you know those numbers as far as like maybe we're producing X amount, but it's actually not it's not being eaten, or it's going back growing well. So I'm curious if there was like a way to even understand that more, where there'd be like a bigger push towards the idea of more nutrition versus yield.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great point. I know for corn, GMO corn, for instance, about 30% goes into the ethanol plants to go into our fuel or ethanol. Another 30% is fed to conventional animals that we don't want to eat anyways. Then another 30% is put into processed foods as the, highly processed industrial seed oil, corn oil. So the majority of those, mass farms that are destroying the land with GMO corn, for instance, we're not even eating that yield. So that is a good example of what you're talking about there. And then, I spoke about the ever-changing climate and a lot of crops getting washed away and ruined, and not even being used in that aspect. And when you switch to regenerative farming practices, it creates more resilience around that. And, the soil stays intact and structured, and you're able to power through the droughts and the floods.
Thank you. That's really interesting. Anybody else have any other questions?
So what is your take on superfoods?
Superfoods are great. I mean, that's kind of a generic term, but I think,
I guess like all the like powders, like spirulina and like maca and reishi
yeah.
mushrooms and things like that.
Oh, I've dabbled in all of those. Yeah. Um, yeah, I'm definitely a big fan. That they usually have pretty, high nutrient density and a lot of different alkaloids and antioxidants that we don't normally get in the standard American diet. And mushrooms can be very good for microbiome and everything else. Yeah, you would just try to source it as best you can. try to find biodynamic or a regenerative source. But I mean, I still, even though I had that presentation about the USDA Organic, I buy a lot of organic products because, it's in this day and age, it's really hard to source everything from regenerative or biodynamic. So you just do the best you can. But yeah, I highly recommend superfoods.
Ryan, I'm also curious, actually. So at Baster, we were doing a lot of synergy building. So like we would have plants that tend to help build each other up. And so we'd be planting. So when you were talking about diversity, instead of like crops that are in the same row and how that can also injure the land, I'm curious if that's kind of what also you've learned throughout your process through regenerative farming, and whether or not there's like this understanding of certain plants that give some synergy or like actually help one another and can amplify.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, the diversity is very important. My favorite is, from the native First Peoples of America. They used the Three Sisters method with corn, beans, and legumes. And so the legumes, they'll harbor a bacteria that brings in more nitrogen. And, the corn needs a lot more nitrogen. So that feeds the corn. And then you have maybe squash, at the bottom, like a round to help fend off, the pest. And so it's fun to see the cohesiveness and the symbiotic relationship between the different plants, and you're just feeding that soil all sorts of different nutrients. And yeah, that's a huge way to build diversity. And you just look at our diet, you want to eat a wide range of different plants and fermented foods and different things to help our gut microbiome. It's the same thing for the soil. You don't want to feed it GMO corn year after year after year. It's just not going to be healthy for the soil. So I know there's some even conventional farms that use cover crops in the off season, which is really great. Living roots constantly feeding the soil. But yeah, the diversity is very important.
Thank you for that. All right, anyone else before we finalize this beautiful talk? All right. Thank you, Ryan, so much. This is really informative. I'm excited to, I'll make sure I share it with everybody. And thank you so much for educating us on the different aspects of regenerative farming. I definitely learned some things on the agriculture side, specifically with the cows. That was really cool to learn about. And always appreciate you and your medicine. So thanks for showing up, and thanks for being so joyful and passionate around the subject.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity. And yeah, if anybody has more questions, reach out to me. And if you want to learn through rap music, I got a lot of great rap music, Regenerative Ryan on all streaming services. And it started out as that, a couple of years ago, and then it transitioned to healing my trauma through my rap, which has been a pretty harrowing journey, which is a lot of fun as well. But and then we spoke, Tracy, about sacred sexuality. Actually, me and Josephine, who's just an absolutely powerful priestess, we created a recent music video called Sex Magic around one of my songs on my new album, The Dark Night of My Soil. So you might be interested in checking out that. She's really sexy and hot in that music video. So yeah, there's that's on my Rumble, but I'm also on YouTube and Spotify and all the major audio streaming services as well.
Thanks, Ryan. And also, actually, I'll invite you to post your YouTube rap on the Dreamers WhatsApp so that I can go and check it out.
Sweet. Sounds good.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. And nice to see everybody. Thanks for coming tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
So much love, everyone.
Much love.